Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with a review and final diagnosis on the ZT0609. If you go back on my channel, you'll see the unboxing video and you'll see the videos that I've done on the 0606 series, the two factory custom knives that were designed by the same guy, R.J. Martin, and that this knife was based on. This is a smaller version of that 0606, and ZT has done a lot of interesting things with this knife. And I was very excited to see this because I really liked the 606, but there were a few things, namely the pivot, that I felt like needed some work, and they said that they were going to work on that. Interestingly enough, if you compare this to a couple of the other knives, or the other couple of knives that they've released this year, namely the 0393 and the 0462, which you can see right here, this is a smaller, slimmer, more EDC-friendly knife, which is a nice thing to see from ZT. Some people are like, oh, ZT, why are you making these small knives? We only want the big overbuilt things. But there is a much bigger market for these smaller slicers than there are for these big aggressive things. Now, my 393 has been heavily modified. I'll show you guys that in another video another time. So let's go ahead and get some vital signs on this guy real quick. Up front, you're looking at a 3.3-inch blade, 4 inches back to the pivot, 7 3/4 inches in overall length, 4 1/4 inches on the handle, about 3.8 inches overall. The most impressive sort of specs on this one are the blade stock, which comes in at exactly 120 thousandths, and then the handle stock, the handle thickness, which comes in at 456 thousandths, or 0.45 inches. I really enjoy that they've made this with a thinner stock and a thinner handle. It makes it for a very, very pleasant EDC situation, especially given that it comes in at about 3.6 ounces. If we go ahead and compare this to another couple of excellent EDC knives, you can see that it comes in at a very nice size profile. Here's a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and a Para 3. If we line these guys up like this, you can see the 0609 falls right in between these two knives for a very much ideal EDC size. So let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically and see how I feel about these different features now that I've had this knife for a couple of months. Up front is that blade done in CPM 20CV. This is absolutely one of the most beautiful blades that ZT has ever done. If you go back and watch those 0606 videos, I say the same thing about those blades. And I'm so thankful that they did this in a full satin finish with stonewashed flats. I love to see this in a satin finish. It is absolutely gorgeous. Add to that, the thin blade stock made this a very, very nice EDC slicer. This took care of cardboard, tape, food, you name it. This is an ideal slicer. It is very, very, very good. And in 20CV steel, it held its edge very nicely and it didn't corrode. I do my own sort of corrosion testing because I wear my knives on the inside of my waistband of my scrubs while I'm at work. And oftentimes I'll do 3 and 4 hour long surgeries where I'm sweating rather hard because I'm wearing lead. So that's pretty much a pretty solid rust test for a lot of these steels. I've induced some corrosion on quite a few blades just by having it on my person during surgery. So the fact that this withstood the Frunkey test is pretty solid to me. Honestly, I have no qualms with this blade. It is absolutely awesome. Perfect, honestly. It has a good sharpening choil. It's got this flipper tab right here that's nice and rounded off and easy to deploy. I will say that the jimping on the flipper tab could use a little bit more aggressive jimps, and there maybe could be one more right there on the edge right there to make it actually easier to deploy with that grip. Sometimes I found myself slipping off of it because the detent is a little bit strong. So let's go ahead and move back and talk about the pivot and the detent. The pivot is the sort of showpiece, but also the fatal flaw on this knife. As you can see, it's a see-through pivot design. You can see my hand moving back and forth behind it. They finally brought this into the production field. R.J. Martin designed this with his son Matt Martin, and this was the custom piece that was on the 0606 series. But now they've introduced it as a production model, and they said at the SHOT Show that they were going to have the tool ready. But ZT didn't sell the knife with the tool, and here I am owning this knife for a couple of months, and there's still no tool available. And so I have not been able to service this knife, and I have no idea when they're going to do it. And what frustrates me even more is that it looks like ZT is trying to introduce the concept of downloadable content to the knife industry. For those of you who play video games, you're well aware of what downloadable content has done to a lot of video games, and often it makes me feel like a company is selling me about 75% of a product with the expectation that I'm going to pay more money to get the rest of the product, the complete product. And so this is a bit frustrating. As a matter of fact, my good buddy Nick Shabazz will not review this knife on the pure principle that they don't have the tool for this proprietary pivot. What I'll also say is that even though mine came perfectly centered, with no blade play, excellent action and lockup, some people got knives that were slightly off center. Some people got knives with some blade play. As it happens with any large production company, there are going to be one or two lemons out there. You know, usually I get them. Luckily I didn't on this one. But those people can't adjust their knives safely. Surely you could fabricate some tool to open this up, and some knife modifiers have done that, but the factory tool remains unavailable, and this is just deeply unacceptable, ZT. Unacceptable. I understand a week or two of a gap, maybe even a month, but I've had this thing now for 2 months, maybe longer, and just nothing. And there's no word of when it's coming out, and it's going to cost me more money, and I'm over it. You know, I've lost interest. It's been too long. You wasted your time. Sorry, that was a huge mess up. This is killing me. And so we'll talk about that at the end of the video here. So moving back to the handles, I really enjoyed these handles. These are milled pieces of 6AL4V titanium. I really enjoy this milling pattern. I think that it's attractive and it's very functional. It provides some good grip. The handle is just magically ergonomic. I loved the ergos on the 606, and it translates well into this smaller knife. Now, for my larger hands, I might have perhaps liked to see this knife just a hair bigger. Maybe a full 3.5 inches would have really made this knife perfect in my hands, and I feel like a lot of people were let down by the actual tininess of this knife. The 0606 was a full 4-inch blade. I really feel that they could have done this in a 3.5-inch variant and done very well. Now, that may have competed with a couple of other knives in their own sort of lineup, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I do enjoy the ergonomics. It is quite comfortable. I get a full 4-finger grip. One of the things I didn't really like was the milling that they did for the clip on the front of the knife here. I ended up putting Blades We Love hardware on this knife in bronze, and I think it dressed it up a little bit. It certainly helped to add it to this right here. Another little qualm that I had was the fact that they did this in this low voltage bronze anodizing, and I'll show you what happens is that when you clean this off, you get a very bright bronze. So I just wiped that with some alcohol. You can see where I cleaned it off, you get a very bright gold, and that's kind of what people are expecting. But then as soon as you touch it, it turns into this sort of muddy looking brownish bronze, which is okay. But, you know, I'm not a fan of these low voltage anodizations. You know, I'm a fan of high voltage green. I would have preferred a color that didn't really color shift quite as much. Just kind of makes it look dirty all the time if you're someone like me. So it is a thing. Moreover, on the clip, onto the clip, I felt that this knife desperately needed a deep carry pocket clip. This is the MXG Gear clip, specifically designed for the 0609. If you have this knife and you like this knife, 1,000,000% go and buy the bronze deep carry clip for it. It is absolutely really well color matched, and it changes this knife to an even better EDC because it rides really deeply. And I feel like when you hold this knife ergonomically, that little swell right there provides extra traction, and it makes it an even more pleasurable ergonomic experience. So highly recommended if you're going to keep this knife. So what is my final diagnosis on this knife? Well, I'm going to go ahead and say my final diagnosis is good ZT, bad ZT. Good ZT in the sense that they made a thin stock with a high quality steel and a high quality smaller knife. I would like to see them do more of this. ZT already has a couple of high quality, smaller, thinner knives in their lineup, the 0450 and the 0460. If I'm perfectly honest, if you're looking for a small 3.5-inch-ish, thin, high quality knife, get the 0450. Don't buy this one because this has this proprietary pivot with no tool. It costs about $100 more than that other knife. It's a great knife, don't get me wrong, but I don't see the reason to buy this over the 450. It's nice, but I really think that ZT screwed up by not having the tool available. Even though it's a beautiful knife, I'm going to have to move on this one, guys. Well, tell me what you think in the comments down below. Click like and subscribe. Check me out on Instagram as Dr. Frunkey, and